Hello, guys, and welcome back to the channel. This is episode 3 of Rocket Lab Weekly, and we have today Matt Farley with us. Thank you so much for being here, and me, Vince. You find both of our Twitter handles in the description box below. So, how was your week, Matt?
Not bad, man. Other than the last couple days in the week, the market decided to kind of go and take a turn for worse. But other than that, um, still pretty good, man. Can't complain. In transition between current home or apartment and moving into a new place. So in the next few weeks, I'm sure people will see a different office space. So stay tuned for that. But other than that, anything really changed too much? I don't think I made any big moves in the market other than maybe selling some covered calls, which turned out to be good because the market took a dump. So
Yeah, that was going to be my question. If you trimmed any positions, or if you didn't trim, because it sounds like you didn't trim, is there any positions that you got worried about?
Got worried about? Nothing as of yet. I think the thing that may worry me a bit is seeing what's kind of going on with Enphase and Tesla and seeing if that proliferates itself into other industries. And I think we'll end up talking a little bit about that as time kind of comes on. But other than that,
yeah, we can talk about it now, because I was a Tesla investor for 1.5 years, I believe, something like that. And I listened to the earnings call, and I basically tweeted that my thesis is broken with Tesla. And I basically was wrong about how much the interest rates affect Tesla, because I always thought that it was not a car company. And then I realized, that if it smells like one, it walks and talks like one, then it is a car company, and it is being affected just as any other car company. And yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna detail it here because it's Rocket Lab Weekly. I made videos on it on the channel, and I was on Emmett's channel talking about it in very much detail. But the point is, I ended up selling my Tesla position. I tweeted about it, and I got 160,000 views on that tweet. It feels like I became like one of the most famous people selling Tesla. And it's so weird because, whenever you buy something, people just go like, oh, okay, cool. But if you sell like one share of something, you get all this like, how dare is you got people like questioning my mental health. Yeah, saying that I need to change my name to Vince Was Bullish. And that made me laugh very much.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And the good news is that because I made this sale, I finally had capital left over to buy Rocket Lab. So I'm a proud Rocket Lab shareholder now. I bought 6,700 shares at the price of 4.22. And I want to speak to you because it's so funny. Like, you make, at least for me, when I buy a stock, and when I've held the stock for a few months, I have zero emotions about the stock. But just when I buy it, then it's like the next few days I go like, oh my god, is it gonna go up? It's totally irrational. So I bought it, and I was like, okay, I know I got it at a very good price because Peter Beck sold the electron failure. It was very, very depressed to begin with. But after I bought it, I was like, shit, what is there for catalyst to make the stock price go up in the near term? Because it feels like we're in a period that the whole market is selling off. Everybody's very pessimistic. It seems like the interest rates are insanely biting, like Enphase, Tesla comes to mind. So what do you think is the hope for Rocket Lab to go up?
Go up. I think there's just at the moment a lot of things acting against it from the environment. I mean, just the interest rate environment's tough. So if there was any concern about near term cash floats or anything like that, I think that would be a concern. Luckily, Rocket Lab has about $400 million in cash, which is better suited than I'd say a lot of the other small launcher or small space systems companies. So in that respect, it's okay. But speaking of the other companies, they aren't in good financial health. And so you have companies like Astra, Relativity, Velo3D that are all kind of scrounging for cash on the floor where they don't really have much left. They don't have a lot of runway for cash at the moment. And so when an entire sector gets pulled down, generally speaking, the rest of them go with it. And really, I think that has a negative piece. But speaking specifically for catalysts, I mean, the near term, I think, is getting as close to product break even for the company as possible. And then second, I think any big releases with respect to Neutron getting closer and closer towards year-end 2024. But I think for now, I think the next 12 months is going to be pretty much like operational intensive, getting things back to, FAA approval to fly again and launch again. I think that's going to be a big piece of it, which I was expecting kind of in the last week, and actually last week as well. So with the last 2 weeks, I was kind of expecting it to kind of progress forward. And here we are, ending up in October, and there hasn't been any launches as of yet in October. So they're either going to have to stack up a lot of launches in November and December. Otherwise, they're going to have to revise down full year guidance for 2023. So
which is a negative catalyst.
Yeah, which is negative catalyst, right? So I don't see any short-term catalysts. I've always kind of been talking about how I think that for the next 12 months, it's just going to kind of be this ebbs and flows. And I think it's going to be at the mercy of the market until we really get to a place where we hit cash flow break even. So which I don't really foresee really happening until the next 12 months or so. So
okay. So we both agree it was a stupid investment decision for me to buy.
I think you only know what the price is today, right? When any of this stuff comes out, with things kind of heating up, the price might move to $8, pretty quick, as if things can continue to go down a path where they're getting closer and closer to cash flow break even every single quarter, and they're on a very succinct path and people can visualize it. Then, $4 is what you can guarantee today. Will it go to $3? It very well could, but you can't guarantee that it will.
Are you into technical analysis at all?
Not really.
Okay. No, because I just wanted to have a look at the chart for also the viewers. Because because I'm always wondering, like, how low can the stock go? Because I think that we can all agree that the most likely outcome is that we're going to go sideways until something very good happens, or until something very bad happens. And then it helps to know what is the range, and it feels like we have a very big support around this 3.70 that has held the stock like once, twice, 3, 4 times. And it's like, I wouldn't be surprised if we go down to that level, but I would be very surprised if we break past that level, because then there is technically no new stop where the stock would stop. So from that viewpoint, it was very safe to buy here close to the support line. And my logic when I was buying it was exactly what we talked about last week's episode, that you can only guarantee the price that you see today. And for me, even $5 was a very good price to start going into Rocket Lab. So 420 was just the icing on the cake, and then I just went ahead full knowing that the price can go below. But my expectation is that I would be very surprised to see it below 370 based on the technicals. Then I wanted to just touch a little bit on this, that it seems like the interest rates are really, really starting to bite in the economy. Mm-hmm. And I was a very big Enphase bull, very big Tesla bull also. And I always thought that somehow, like, solar, for example, is something that makes financial sense. And people will never stop investing into solar because, if it takes you longer to get your money back, it's still a good investment. But but I never really thought through that the interest rate can go so high that it just doesn't make sense anymore to put it on your roof. And I guess it's also that as the return is not as good, because when the interest rates were zero, maybe it was 5 years, and then from that point your solar panels are for free, right? And then I was like, okay, the interest went up a little bit, so maybe now it's 10 years to earn your money back. But once this return, like getting back your capital, becomes like 15-20 years, like people just stop doing it. And it can basically make a business model like impossible to do. And I was wondering, like, this is just for discussion on this show, like how much is Rocket Lab sensitive to high interest rates? Obviously, Rocket Lab is not being bought by private customers, but they can have customers that are startups which don't get funding because the VCs are very tight on money. Like what do you think about, so how stable is Rocket Lab, and how worried should we be about the economic environment that is around us, which seems to be very bad?
I don't think it hurts necessarily if you're thinking about companies like NASA or some of these other very much Fed related, like federal government related entities. Where it does hurt if you're thinking about companies like Black Sky, or you're thinking about companies like Varda, which are very much VC intensive, and they're just kind of getting off the ground. They're not necessarily in a boat where they're flush with cash. I think it hurts the amount of cadence that you're expecting from the launch perspective of Rocket Lab. I think that they'll still have a backlog of stuff, but just like with all the other space industry stocks that we're seeing right now, they're all scrounging for cash. And so if you have this high interest rate environment, they're either going to try to they're going to end up having to do equity swaps for basically getting debt for a share of equity in the company, or they're going to having to have really high interest rates, and that's going to obviously make them want to spend less and shrink down. So instead of this high growth environment, from a perspective of being able to go to the market, get cheap cash at 3% or 4%. Now they're going to have to go to the market and get it at 8 or 9% because of the credit quality of some of these companies that are getting it. And so, will it have an impact on the speed at which Rocket Lab is able to grow from a space systems perspective and launch perspective? I think so. And so I think it'll push out the cadence in which you do launches, the speed in which revenue grows for the space systems, and all that as well. But I think the only thing that's going to keep it hand in hand and really from dying out at the moment, contracts from NASA and other government related entities across the world, like Japan and Australia, kind of coming in to help save the day. So
okay, so basically your viewpoint is that we're not going to see a complete stop in customers like Enphase and SolarEdge, but we're going to see like a slowdown in their expansion.
Well, I would say it's fair to say that Enphase and Tesla also didn't see a complete shutdown of customers either. Obviously, their revenues didn't go to zero, but I would say it's probably in a similar boat. I mean, you definitely saw.
It's funny. I would want to argue against this because I think you're right in one way, but in another way, because of this Electron launch failure, like they have a backlog of launches, right? And then they have, like, I feel that they can play, like if the cadence slows down, they can play around with certain other players like NASA, like the Army, that they can pull forward and basically make up for this loss, because we know that they're getting Amazon's Kuiper. I think that's satellites that we think that they're getting, that they will be assembling the Amazon satellites, and that is a company that is not dependent on. Yeah, they have the cash in the bank, and they're not dependent on the economy to make it work. And I think that they can play around with it so that it doesn't slow their cadence down.
I think it's plausible. I think it all just depends on who's ready to launch at the moment. I mean, if you have the the availability, from what Rocket Lab says, whether or not you believe it or not, but in the past conference calls, they've said our launch cadence is our launch cadence is based off of customer readiness. And so, and I know Rocket Lab does create their own internal satellites and stuff of the like, but I feel like they have excess capacity to do more. And so is the customer cadence that we're seeing, the fact that, or the launch cadence that we're seeing, really an impact of, say, readiness for the satellites that are being launched, or is Amazon just taking their sweet time? Is Globalstar taking their sweet time? That I don't necessarily have an inkling for, because they launched 12 launches last year, and they were on kind of pace to do 15 or so this year. Whether or not they get there, I guess, is all dependent upon, what happens with the FAA and return to launch. But to me, going from 12 to 15 is not a big jump, especially if you're anticipating growing at a much faster pace and eventually getting to a place where you're able to launch once per launch pad per week, which ends up being about 150 launches a year, because there's 3 current launch pads, not to include Neutron in that, because at the moment they don't have launch pad 4 ready. But that's where you're at. So in that case, you're only utilizing 10% of the effective launch cadence, and obviously that puts a hamper on if you were to only be using 10% efficiency of the launch cadence. Then that obviously puts slower pace at the space systems revenue. So it's between a rock and a hard place, right? If things were continuing to go as well as possible, I don't think we would have only launched 14 or 15 times this year.
Okay. Then another thing that I was just thinking about is what is the, like, between the time that you decide to launch a satellite, isn't it years before you can produce the satellite and actually launch it? So that would mean that what they're launching this year in 2023, it's the stuff that was sold and scheduled in 2021, right? When the economy was still very good. So it would take, if I'm correct, I don't know what is this difference between, like, how fast. I guess it's not with Amazon Prime, that you order a satellite and then next day delivery.
Yeah, I don't know what the lead time is. I'll be blunt. I feel like it's all very dependent upon who's making the satellites, right? And are they making the satellites themselves and you're sending them into space, or is Rocket Lab utilizing their photon system to be able to basically get into space? I feel like you'd be on 2 very different timelines at that point. Different space systems will have different kind of criteria, like the 0G stuff with Varda. I think that would require Varda to be up to speed and ready to ship the satellites to Rocket Lab before they send them into space, rather than Rocket Lab being ready. But I don't know the intricacies and logistics of all that.
Okay. So going back to the cadence, I want to show you a video, because Rocket Lab is waiting for the FAA to and their own investigation also, I guess, to be able to launch. And this week there has been some news that SpaceX, Blue Origin, and other space companies, I guess Rocket Lab is pressuring the government because the process of the FAA is broken. And I just want to show a clip of what has happened, and then we can give our comments after. So let me know if you hear it.
Now, sadly, there is no direct news yet from the FAA and the Fish and Wildlife Service, but this week, quite an interesting news article dropped from Eric Berger at Ars Technica. In this, it was shared that senior management at SpaceX is strongly urging the US government to provide more funding to the FAA, funding to aid in not just the certification of the Starship program, but actually the entire space sector. Another great example in this article were the much more commonplace Falcon 9 launches taking place from Vandenberg in California. In this case, SpaceX has deliberately chosen to only really do night launches from there, as the launch trajectory comes quite close to Hamala Beach. To do day launches, they would actually need to determine with the FAA if the beach needs to be closed. Now, the problem is, if they were to request this, it would directly take away resources from the Starship analysis. Even worse is that this problem extends even further to other agencies requesting FAA approvals. On Wednesday, in fact, the US Senate discussed these same issues with key representation from SpaceX, Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, and others as well.
This is a critically important hearing. We're at an inflection point with incredible innovation in commercial space launch. The criticality is especially true in the face of strategic competition from state actors like China. Starship has been ready for its next flight test for more than a month, but we are waiting for an FAA license and accompanying interagency review.
The positive thing is that there was wide agreement that regulatory reform was needed. More staff to support the sector, obviously, but a lot of talk about a goal to provide more of a one-stop shop for approvals instead of needing to deal with so many different government agencies.
We need to cut red tape around all the various types of permitting that permeate commercial space. Too many agencies are involved. It slows technological and scientific advancements, and it puts us at a disadvantage compared to our international competitors and rivals. It is long past time that we create a true one-stop shop for the regulation and licensing of commercial space activity.
Yeah, that's pretty good, right? Make no mistake, to continue to stay ahead of China in this new space race, the big players in the commercial industry simply can't remain stuck on the pad. As said, inefficient regulation is decreasing American competitiveness at the same time as space programs elsewhere around the world rise up. I think what is wonderful is that there is a really strong push to resolve this problem now.
The burden should be put on us as a private company, put on SpaceX, and let us develop at the fastest pace. We should be the ones that are driving the development, not being driven by regulatory oversight.
Well, and having seen firsthand what you're doing in South Texas, it is extraordinary and very, very impressive. My final question, if you were still at NASA, would this delay be acceptable? Would schedule delays like this be something that makes a NASA program successful?
Simply would not be acceptable.
So that was the clip. Let me just take this down. So I think that this is very good that it's being addressed, because it seems a bit ridiculous that they can only launch at night, because if they would ask for a day launch, it like takes away, you know, the employee forces from the super heavy. So they're like trying to send back the agency and not like overwork them. But what are your thoughts about this?
I think, I work in an industry that's pretty well regulated as well, with a lot of permitting and being able to do stuff. And, I'm not saying that regulation is bad. I'm not saying that oversight is bad when I say something like this, but I think it always needs to be revisited to ensure that it's appropriate for that the state or the federal entities are not overpowering the industry to the point where it's super restrictive. Now, of course, you always have to keep in mind environmental and just safety concerns overall, which I think is very important and should not ever be overlooked, especially when it comes to safety. Everyone deserves to go home at the end of the day, just the way that they came in to the office or to the launch pad. So that is of utmost concern for everybody. But, you have to play this really good intermediary between the two, because you could easily kill an industry like coal has been, over the past several years due to all the regulatory concerns and the push towards green and stuff of the like. And that could be environmental reason and stuff of the like in the United States to push it for that reason. But I agree wholly with the communication that's ongoing. And I think that, over time, it's going to be something that becomes more and more of a conflict, just based on the fact that cadence is increasing across the industry as a whole. No longer is NASA the one that is really driving all these launches, because NASA is kind of just playing a kind of a back seat and allowing these contractors now, like the ULA, SpaceX, and Rocket Lab, kind of drive the cadence in which things are kind of being launched. So it's an interesting sort of dynamic that I don't necessarily, it's still kind of in its infancy. I mean, it's really only been 10 years since NASA was kind of shut down, and you've had the need for these kind of private companies to launch these vehicles. And so I don't think that they've really gotten to a point where it was of concern until more recently. So let's just hope that the communication between the regulatory bodies and the government continue to talk well and meet in amicable terms to make sure that, one, the environment stays safe, two, people stay safe, and three, we're able to do whatever we need to do to continue to advance society.
Yeah, to be honest, before this episode, I wanted to look up like what is it that the FAA needs to approve on a rocket, and I couldn't find exactly, and I'm absolutely not an expert on this, but I did find some articles in a way when, for example, that the FAA is investigating how the Super Heavy blew up on its first test flight, right? And then they were doing months of investigation, and then they gave 63 points for SpaceX to fix. And obviously, I didn't read what these points are, but I kind of got the idea that the bureaucrats in the FAA were like trying to look at the engineering of Super Heavy. I might be completely wrong. And they said, like, of course, you idiots, it blew up because you didn't fix this. And then the pad was too low, and this was to this and that. And I'm like, but isn't SpaceX like automatically, like, obviously they don't want their own rockets to be blowing up. And they said that this was a test flight, and most probably it is going to blow up, you know? And then I feel that there's like a little bit of an overlap, like maybe the government shouldn't be engineering, you know, private companies' things. So they just need to find a way, I guess, how it can be safe and streamlined, and maybe don't do things that are not necessary, because I'm not sure how necessary it is to tell SpaceX why their Super Heavy blew up, and give them recommendations, because I think that they're anyways, it's their own best interest to not have that happen again, right?
Yeah, I don't think that necessarily the FAA is pushing towards. I think in that video it actually explained the FAA isn't really the ones that are driving them to make sure that things are in the right order. I think it's an internal led investigation for SpaceX to make sure that everything from their I's being dotted to their T's being crossed, that they've gone through every single checklist and made sure that everything's okay. And with respect to the failure for SpaceX for the Starship, I mean, a rocket of this magnitude has never been built before, and with the ability to have the ability to land itself as well, which is something that is, obviously you have to go up into orbit, and then you also have to come down. And so I hope for sake of space exploration, the second launch goes on without a hitch and it's able to land without a hitch. But that's a very heavy rocket, and something that has not and yet to be tested. Just like what we found with Starship and Falcon 9, there's likely to be several failures. Very few companies in the world are even able to launch and have a reusable rocket, let alone something to the magnitude of a Starship. And so I think what they're
something
just trying
like
to do,
five companies out of 250 rocket startups or something that are able to launch.
Yeah. So I think it's something that people need to be patient, and I don't think too many people were too negative when Starship didn't meet its initial expectations. But anyway.
I mean, my initial expectation was that, like, I hope it clears the pad, and that's the communication I understood from Musk, that as long as it clears the pad, it's a success. And it almost flew, right? Like it almost, like, as far as I understand, the pad was not fixed correctly, and then as the flames went from the rocket, then you had debris that knocked out a few engines, and then it didn't have enough power to actually fully make it into orbit. But had it not been for the broken engines from this debris, like it would have had a very good shot at reaching orbit on the first try.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I did have something to kind of bring into the table, which was kind of specifically talking about the Varda space group, which is kind of the zero-G technology that is kind of being used for say, government and also pharmaceuticals. And so to give people some background, Varda is working with Rocket Lab to kind of create these environments and satellites to be able to put zero-G satellites into space for experiments. And more specifically, talking about looking at things, and I'm not 100%, educated on a lot of these things, but just looking at micro environments that are allowed to either have zero-G or near zero-G implementations that can unlock new small molecules, biological therapy solutions. And so they're working collectively with Rocket Lab to put these opportunities in little mini space labs into space to be able to help develop some of these things and understand some of these experiments to see. And there's kind of a multitude of different things they're doing. They're obviously doing it from a pharmaceutical lens, but also they're looking at it from a lens of government agency sort of perspectives as well. So here they're talking about hypersonic flight testing to reproduce some hypersonic and reentry flight environments without obviously the costly dedicated representative test vehicle themselves. And so they're helping the government with respect to that. So it's interesting to kind of see what Varda themselves might be doing, which obviously will be utilizing a lot of Rocket Lab partnership to be able to kind of do that. But they've already had one successful launch with Rocket Lab, and I think that they've signed up for 3 more. And so the hope is that they continue to grow, and with Varda growing, obviously that will help have another kind of partner in space with Rocket Lab.
And Varda is basically a startup, as far as I understand, right?
I'm not 100% sure what kind of phase they are in terms of their growth, but I think that they're relatively new.
Do you know who's financially behind them?
I don't, to be very honest with you.
Okay.
Let's see. Looks like a few people like General Capital, General Catalyst, Caffeinated Capital, Lux.
Founders Fund.
Yeah,
That's Peter
Founders
Thiel.
Fund. Yeah.
Palantir.
So yeah, we'll see where this kind of comes into play, but it's kind of cool. This is, I guess, the satellite, which they're kind of talking about with zero-G, low Earth orbit, microgravity sort of things. So more to come, I'm sure, and I'm sure that with more success, then obviously this is another avenue for Rocket Lab to create some money.
Yeah, it is very exciting. I don't know what it is about the space stuff, but yeah, it's very, very exciting. All these space stations, space factories, rocket launches.
Yeah,
it's we're still kids when it comes to this.
Yeah, very true. Do we have any kids speaking of kids in the audience with any questions or anything of the like?
Yeah, let me see. Costa, hello. How's the little one doing? Yeah, my daughter is doing good. I'm not doing so good. I'm a bit sick, but the show must go on. Then there is some technical analysis. There was a very good question here. Can you see this one? That's also something that we haven't covered yet, that there was news this week that this is also what the question has to do with. Let me just get Rocket Lab's Twitter.
Yeah, do you believe Blue Origin will be ready for the Mars launch? Having huge doubts. 2 Futons. I need to get 1 for launch, but personally, I do it in 2 Electron launches.
Yeah, so this is the one that he's mentioning, that we got news this week that the Escapade spacecrafts, or twin spacecrafts, passed a test, and they started integrating the hardware and getting it ready for launch. And this baby needs to ride on a Blue Origin rocket. And Blue Origin has a horrible track record of, first of all, they've never put anything in orbit, as far as I know. They have had reusable flights, but they were just by the edge of space, and then they came back. And this is like something that even goes beyond orbit. Like you have to go to Mars. And yeah, what do you think about this, Matt?
I'm trying to see if that's true, if Blue Origin's gone to orbit or not. Yeah, I guess you're right. As of August 9th, 2013 or 2023. Interesting. So yeah, I think kind of going from 0 to 100 might be a little difficult. I just was always
This is
assuming
0 to 200 because
Yeah.
it's not just orbit, it's like going to another planet.
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. For some reason, I was under the assumption that because they've landed the vehicle, they've launched it and landed it, that they went to orbit. But interesting to see that they have yet to truly go.
No, that was
into,
the big fight with Musk, that they did it just before the Falcon landed, and
Mhm.
then Bezos tweeted that it was like the first reusable rocket, and then Musk was saying that no, because they had these grasshoppers, and technically that was the same thing, and then like Bezos didn't go into orbit, and it's like 2 orders of magnitude more energy to do what the Falcon 9 does than what the Blue Origin did, and then they were fighting on Twitter about this.
I do remember that argument between the two of them. Interesting. I didn't realize that Blue Origin was founded earlier than SpaceX, though. Now that I'm looking into it, yeah, it was founded in 2000 versus I think SpaceX was founded in 2003 after Musk had sold PayPal.
Yeah, and I read this Ashley Vance's When the Heavens Went for Sale or Became for Sale book, and one of the founder of Firefly, Mark K, I don't remember his last name. He was working at NASA, then he went to SpaceX, helped on developing the Falcon 1, and he really liked, the tempo and, how intense it was at SpaceX. And then he got hired to Blue Origin, and he lasted a week. And he said that he was getting emails from his colleagues about going out on bike rides in the afternoon to ease their minds, and weekend barbecues. And he said it was unimaginable at SpaceX to have this. And he was like, "What the heck are these guys doing?" And he quit like after 2 weeks. So they have a very interesting, very different from any other rocket company that was in the book. They are, I don't know what they're doing at Blue Origin.
Yeah, I don't know. I've known that at the moment they got a lot of backing from people, and I think obviously they have a lot of backing from Jeff himself. But yeah, in terms of delivering consistent results like Rocket Lab and SpaceX and ULA, I don't really see them in the same league at the moment. And so I think that at the moment, the where I hang my hat is with ULA, with Rocket Lab and SpaceX with respect to consistent getting to orbit sort of launches. And so when people always kind of ask me like, "Oh, is Blue Origin going to eat their lunch? Is Astra? You have all these other competitors." It always comes back to who's actually delivered to date. And Rocket Lab was delivering before they even went public, and a lot of these other companies, unfortunately, went and got all this capital starting in 2018 to 2020, while these guys have been putting rockets into space since before that. So meaning Rocket Lab, ULA, and SpaceX. So it's interesting to kind of hear some of these guys talk, and I think more competition is better, but you never know.
But do you think that they have a plan B in case Blue Origin is not ready and the satellite is ready, and then there's no news on?
That's a good question. I would have to look at how big the Escapade spacecraft really is. I mean, is it something that Rocket Lab could potentially even launch? I don't know.
Yeah,
the thing looks pretty
it's
big.
True because it's true because the Electron, I guess it's impossible that it would be able to launch any big payload into Mars orbit.
Mm-hmm.
So and I
yeah,
mean, you
750
see the size
kilograms
of it.
is the max. So
yeah, but that's to Leo, no? like to low Earth orbit. So like to Mars orbit, I don't know, like 5 kilos. And
Yeah, I don't know.
you see the on the picture that it's big.
Yeah,
Maybe
it's not small.
maybe it will be a Falcon 9 launch.
And I'm actually kind of curious as well, because it looks like, just looking at this, it doesn't look like Blue Origin has launched anything in 2023.
No.
It looks like the last time they launched was September of 2022. And that was a failure as well. Interesting.
Yeah, Christopher Ben, he said that there is an upcoming mission for Firefly with Rocket Lab. I don't actually know about this one, because do you mean that there's a Rocket Lab satellite on a Firefly rocket, or?
Yeah, there's I think if I remember correctly, Rocket Lab is helping design something that'll be on the lunar lander, which is being designed by Firefly. Who will actually launch it? I don't know, because I think Firefly, from what they have pretty small rockets themselves, and so I'd anticipate it would either have to be a ULA or a SpaceX Falcon 9 or something more to be able to launch something of that magnitude into space. 'Cause I know Electron's too small to be launching a lunar lander. I'd anticipate into space.
And you brought up an interesting point about competition in the space industry, and I wanted to ask your opinion about it, because it feels like there is a rush to have companies that can launch rockets. So we know that at least when I read this Ashley Vance's book, there was about 250 startups that were trying to shoot up rockets. But to me, it feels like there is going to be a huge consolidation, and there's only going to be a few companies that survive this, and then it will sort of be like the auto industry, that it will be a few giants and an insanely hard barrier of entry to get financing and even like to develop a new technology to go to space. And I think that SpaceX is definitely going to be in the club. And I feel that Rocket Lab is also definitely in the club, just because of how much they have already launched and they have this successful track record. And I feel maybe there is like 2-3 places, or maybe one more place up for grabs, and then that's it. And then that part of the innovation is closed, and then the next phase is like satellites and space systems and space stations. And yeah,
I think competition is good, because what it will do is, it's good and bad, right? Because then a lot of money gets spread around to a lot of different people. Obviously, some of that is going to be wasted into bankruptcy and stuff like. But what it'll do is it'll challenge people to create the best product and most efficient in the long term, right? And so obviously that's what was leading SpaceX into reusability and stuff like. If NASA were in charge of all this stuff, I don't think we'd even be talking about reusability at the moment. So I think this is something to kind of think about, consider when you're talking about all these different ways in which innovation and ingenuity can kind of be had. I think what sometimes people forget is, if you don't have competition, then it allows people to kind of relax a little bit. And at the moment, I don't think that that's appropriate for where we are in terms of the space exploration industry.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you say that, because I think that this is one of the things that I think takes out the risk from Rocket Lab, because they are like, I don't think that the Department of Defense, NASA, would let SpaceX be the only competitor, because that's also what they were trying to avoid. I think they even have a policy on this, that they need to award contracts to at least 2 or 3 companies, or they need to try to divide up the contracts between 2 to 3 companies to make sure that there is constant competition. But I don't think that there's place for endless competition. Like, I don't think that there is space for 100 rocket companies, and it will be because I also think that if you look at the rocket technology and the improvement in the rocket technology, it's the efficiency that has improved and the cheapness of the rocket and the reusability that has improved. But if you look at the actual tech of the rocket, it's sort of the same as it was in the 50s and 60s, you know, so that it wasn't like a huge breakthrough discovery on how rocket engines work, or, you know, how there is a more effective ways of you know, using the rockets. And this is why I think that it will be super hard, because there will not be a new rocket company that will have electric rockets, or they will have, I don't know, whatever propulsion rockets, because it doesn't really work. Like, the only way you can get out of Earth's gravity is with this chemical combustion engines, and that tech has been sort of the same since the 50s.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I mean, you kept seeing less and less funding, right? Like, you kept, like, obviously there was billions upon billions of dollars spent in the 50s and 60s to be able to get the man on the moon. And now the amount of money, obviously with inflation and stuff the like, we spend way more than that. But, you know, I think with that, you kept seeing the want to reduce the amount of spending, to the point where in 2013 they got rid of launches from NASA all in all, you know, and so it really took somebody like an Elon or Peter Beck to get you to a point where you had lower cost entry and ingenuity and innovation to be able to make it appropriate and affordable to continue space exploration for the American people. Otherwise, you know, we'd be kind of just left behind.
But by the way, did they cancel the SLS system, or is it, because I hear a lot of talk about it, like, why does that system even exist when there is so much cheaper alternatives? But I never heard that it was canceled.
I don't know.
Okay. Because I heard something like this SLS is NASA's like reusable rocket, and I heard something like it's $400 million per launch or something, whereas like SpaceX would be, and that's after initial investment of, I don't know, $4 billion or something. And if they do like 10 launches, then, you know, just the R&D cost per launch is 400 million, and then the reusability is another 400 million, so it's like 800 million for a launch, whereas you can buy a, you know, Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy for 100 million.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting harder and harder to justify that as the time goes on.
Yeah, and I know, I mean, the cost of Electron is probably in the order of to build one from scratch is probably in the order of $4 to $5 million, maybe less. But, you know, you have to think that they're trying to make a decent margin on that, and they're selling it from anywhere between $6 to $9 million for the launches. So I assume the cost of just making that rocket is $4 to $5 million itself. So.
Christopher, about last launch had reused Rutherford engines, 9, I think, all performed perfectly. Costs are going down. Tesla is not a car company. Rocket Lab is not just a launch company. Picks and shovels make more. Cool. Did you manage to see it, or?
If the SLS is canceled, sorry, is that what you're saying?
No, because I saw you were reading this comment and then I took it away.
I was reading something about Astra in the background. That's my fault.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Cool. Do you have anything else to add for this week's? It wasn't a very busy week in Rocket Lab.
No, it wasn't. No, I encourage people to continue to look. I mean, I think that, you know, there's going to be a few quarters of capital exposure and just money burn from here until I think you hit some sort of major catalyst that could drive the stock. And so my thought process for anybody that's thinking about investing in the company is to continue to understand whether or not, you know, you wait now or you continue to wait for some additional risk to kind of be taken off of the table before you truly make a sizable investment. And so the only thing you can do really, though, is look at the price today. I mean, the price could go down to $2. It could go down, you know, and it might not ever come to fruition and come out with anything, right? I mean, technically, there's no guarantees. I just don't think at the moment NASA would let it happen. But anything is technically possible. You could get diluted to crap as well, but I don't currently see a need for the company to be dilutive with $400 million cash in the bank. And also, I think next year they have $100 million kind of check-in that they need to do with somebody else. And so what they do with that, I think in the middle of next year is something that needs to kind of be considered as well. But, it's an interesting time. I'm probably going to continue to add, shares, and we'll probably continue, especially once risk gets moved off the table. I might take an opportunity to sell some of my S&P 500 and add more to this position. But like I said, it's all going to be very dependent upon what shows up is in the earnings reports and how much progress they're making on making things cheaper and easier to fly over time. So this is my final thoughts.
And if you invest now, get used to volatility. And right now, it seems like Rocket Lab is going down with the market. And that, to me, seems like everybody's just sell, ask questions later. And the baby is being like thrown out with the bathwater, because great companies, regardless of their fundamentals, also get oversold. Because I mean, how much more can the stock get punished after Peter back sales? We had a failed rocket launch, and then we're still going down because the market is going down. I think it's like an overcorrection. That's my opinion, but the market can be irrational longer than you can stay solvent.
Right. Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you so much. Please make sure, everyone, that you're subscribed to the channel. You can find Matt's data and his channel in the description box below. Thank you so much for being with us. Next week, we're going to have a guest on the channel. So that's going to be a very exciting episode. And hopefully there's going to be more happening with Rocket Lab next week. And then it's earnings. So then there's definitely going to be a lot to talk about.
Definitely lots to talk.
Yeah, cool. So thank you so much.
Thank you, brother.
Have a great Saturday evening, and see you next week.
Oh, and by the way, for those people that are still listening, Tanner and Tavis reached out to me last week, and so I think on Wednesday or Thursday we pre-recorded their Stock Tank episode, and so it's going to be on Rocket Lab, and they poke and pry and try to understand why anyone would take on the risk of owning a Rocket Lab today versus waiting some time. And so they put me in the hot seat. They did a really good job. They're really kind. They gave me the effort to speak a good bit about the company. And so for anybody that's looking more for a grounds up view on what Rocket Lab is all about and what kind of thought process is going on and where the potential may be, should check that out. I don't know if it's on Tanner's channel, Future Investing, or if it's on Tavis's channel, which is Fundamentals of Investing. But either way,
has it come out already? Or
no, it'll be. I think they release it on Monday. I don't know if they do it as a premiere or if they do it as a live stream that they just have a pre-recorded video. But they do a Stock Tank weekly episode, and for some reason they reached out to me. So
could you tweet it out when it comes out, so
for sure
we can see the video?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Cool.
So thank you so much, and see you next week.
Yeah, see you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, ciao.